So the top story this morning, the government's mobilising the military and Royal Navy as they race to rescue 4,000 British nationals who are trapped in Sudan.
Foreign Office Minister Andrew Mitchell said they were considering every option and rejected comparisons to the evacuation of Afghanistan.
The position in Sudan is completely different. First of all, in Afghanistan, there were troops on the ground, British troops on the ground. There are not British troops on the ground in Khartoum and Sudan. In Afghanistan, the airport was open and working. The airport in Khartoum is out of action entirely. And thirdly, there was in Afghanistan a permissive environment, and so we had the permission of the Taliban to take people out. There is no such permissive environment at all in Sudan and in the capital city.
Now, all of this comes as the US Secretary of State announces a 72-hour ceasefire between the two factions in the country.
Well, let's speak to the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Always good to talk to you, Robert. Incredibly serious situation in Sudan. All hopes now pinned on this ceasefire, but extraordinarily difficult given there is no possibility of airlifts. All of the British citizens have to get to some port if they can, preferably Port Sudan.
There is just a possibility, but as you're suggesting, the airfields available are very small, can take only one or two aircraft at a time. I don't think we can say never on that. The Dutch got 3 flights away yesterday, and the Dutch have been very helpful for the British. 2 problems. One is the ceasefire going to hold? They haven't held up to now. And the second is locating the British people and their dependents and their families where they are all over Khartoum. It is very, very difficult, particularly as the internet and communication facilities have been pretty dodgy, not to say going down over the last 24 hours.
Yeah. Robert, there's talk of this British expeditionary force in Port Sudan. And there's all this talk, and the press are adapting this language, that the army are there to scope out the region. Well, what does the term scope mean?
Yeah, I wish they used clearer language. Gosh, briefings are fairly tortuous, particularly for the poor old English language. What they mean is that they have to get undercover people, or not so undercover people, but people probably in disguise, just going through the streets just to find British people, presumably, and it must be so that the consular services and the British Embassy will have a record of some of these people, of where they reside. They're supposed to have registered, but we've heard on British media from the bereft in Khartoum that it's been very difficult to sign up at times. It's incredibly complex. It's complex in a way that the rescue from Kabul 2 years ago, despite what Andrew Mitchell said, was very complicated. The fact is, we're not comparing apples and oranges or whatever here, and I think that it's quite wrong to say that, but these rescues are very difficult, and what we're learning with the fragility of so many of these countries now, particularly in the region around Sudan, we're going to have to think of mounting these things quite frequently. Ships, as you say, are on their way. One of them may well be arriving already at Port Sudan, but the response really has been not amongst the swiftest, could I say, of the principal allies of Britain amongst NATO and the North American countries. The Canadians have been very good.
Yeah, well, I suppose part of the challenge is if you evacuate your consular team before citizens, then there is going to be this time lag, isn't there, before you can get on with evacuating people because you haven't got that capability. And also, I suppose one of the big challenges in all of this is there are a lot of people who happen to be in the country visiting. For example, we're hearing reports of 71 NHS doctors there who we need to get back, but it's very hard for the consulate for the embassy to know exactly where they are. And indeed, we're going to be speaking in a moment to a mother who had gone to visit family, so not actually a resident, but British passport holders in the country.
This is extremely complicated, but they have to focus, and it's a very big area, on Khartoum first, which is not to say that there are people who are in distress or who would like to be rescued elsewhere in the country, in a very large country it is indeed too. It's the 3rd largest in Africa. But we've heard, oh dear, shades of Afghanistan. Not that the ambassador was away there. He was very good and he was very much on the ground. But the ambassador is on holiday. And part of the problem is that the ambassador also covers Egypt and is generally resident in Egypt. The spaces are enormous. And even this minimal obligation of Britain's security forces and consular forces to look after British citizens looks like it's getting much, much more difficult, particularly as these ministries, the Foreign and Development Office, as it now is, the Foreign Office in old money, is really pretty pushed budget-wise as well.
Robert, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis of the situation. Much appreciated. We're now going to hear the story of someone who's directly affected by all of this. Sarra Elkhalifa, whose mother is there stranded in Sudan. Sarra speaks to us from Bournemouth this morning. Sarra, sorry for this whole situation. How worried are you for your mother?
I am just absolutely terrified. I'm worried for my mum. My mum's me sister, who's she with, her two nieces, my cousins, and my granddad, because it's every time I contact them, the situation just gets worse and worse and worse, and I have to keep travelling around the country in order to find refuge and to find safety.
And tell us a little bit about that process, because I know you've lost contact with your mother since the weekend, but before that she'd moved to one particular area where the prisons had been opened and rapists and murderers were walking through the streets. I mean, a terrifying situation.
Yeah, so she moved to a place which is just a bit south of Khartoum. She moved, what was it, I think Wednesday last week, to a place called Wad Madani, and we thought that she was going to be absolutely safe, completely fine when she was there. And what happened to her is, because she had a location on, it was pinged off her phone, and then the house next door got bombed and attacked, and because it got picked up. And then in Wad Madani itself, the opposing force against the military, they decided to release 10,000 prisoners, and these prisoners are on death row, and these are some of the worst humans you could that in the world. They're rapists, child molesters, the baddest apples of the bunch, and you're leaving. And the government's advice was saying just stay inside. She has to stay inside, because if she goes out, she doesn't have a risk anymore of just being shot and killed immediately. She has a risk of being tortured, of, God forbid, the worst thing happening. And it's just trying to get her to travel somewhere safer is just, and having no contact with her, it's awful.
Yeah, and I mean, as you say, your mum, her relatives caught in the middle of all of this. And I'm not asking you to tell me which side they're on, but does it matter to them who gains superiority in this? Do you have to be on one side or the other?
I mean, it doesn't matter if you're on one side or not, because the two sides are just going to kill each other and kill Sudan. It doesn't really matter who wins at this point. They're going to have nothing to win. The winner gets rubble and dead bodies.
Yeah.
And what do you make of the British government's handling of all of this? There's been some criticism of evacuating diplomats and their families before citizens. Do you feel your mum's been abandoned?
100%. Because you were able to get out, between America and the UK, they were able to get out 100 diplomats onto one plane, and then they're arguing, oh, it was too hard, we couldn't do it, we couldn't get enough people on. You were very easily and successfully able to get out the diplomats. Why can't you get out the citizens? Like, these are people that they're mothers, they're hard workers, they're people in the UK. Like, my younger brother and sister, they depend on my mother to come back and help them. They're struggling. I think it's absolutely awful what they're doing with government. They need to hopefully get them all out, get as many people out, not just British nationals, just help the people in Sudan.
So, Sarra, would you ever see a day, would you dare go back?
I personally haven't been to Sudan since I was 15, so nearly 6 years now. And even then, it wasn't that safe. My brother and sister that recently just went there. We even, because it wasn't even that safe when they went, we would say, you're not allowed to even go to the shops by yourself. You're not allowed to go to anywhere by yourself without a native Sudanese person there. I can't see myself going back probably for another decade, realistically.
Well, I know you're at Durham University now. You've had to come home to look after your siblings in the absence of your mum. We really hope you get news of her. We're hoping that the fact that you haven't heard from her means that she's on one of these ships and on her way to safety. Keep us posted. Let us know how your mum gets on, won't you?
Yes, I will. Thank you so much. There's also a petition going around to bring her back to the UK, so please sign.